There are a number of people throughout history who have inspired my thinking, who have challenged me to think differently and to think more clearly, to approach problems and opportunities in new ways. And one of those individuals is a person that you may or may not have ever heard of. His name is Buckminster Fuller. If you want to do a little search about Buckminster Fuller, you may find that he's the guy who popularized the concept of the geodesic dome, which was popular in the 70s and 80s. He was involved in the design movement in the U.S. for a couple of decades and involved a lot of interesting and novel design considerations. He was definitely a person who thought outside of the box, who imagined possibilities beyond the scope of what many of us think about on a daily basis. And while I certainly don't agree with all of his beliefs and values that he espoused, there are some lessons that I have come to appreciate. And I think there are 5 of them that I'd like to talk about with you today. I've jotted them down here in advance. I think they have some real relevance, some real value for any of us who are trying to discover treasures, literal or metaphorical in life, truth seekers, problem solvers, people who are trying to create opportunities that that are not apparent to other people who want to notice things and look at things a little bit differently, see things that are that others are blind to. So I'm going to walk you through a series of 5 quotes from Buckminster Fuller, each that has a nugget and a lesson worth our consideration. But before I do that, let me tell you a little bit about him and his story. And I get all of this from books that I've read by Buckminster Fuller. The first one is, I think he was in his early 30s, and he had gone through a series of careers. I believe he was a bricklayer and did some other things and some failed efforts and endeavors. And in fact, he was despairing of life itself. And he was standing alongside Lake Michigan and was in a very down and dark place in his life. And at that moment, he had a kind of message that he describes that he thinks came to him. Now, I'm not claiming that this was a real message or not or anything like that, but it was certainly something that came to his mind that he thought about. And I wrote it down to make sure I got it right. It was he wrote about this a long time ago. The thought that came to his mind was, the way he worded it was, you belong to the universe, your significance will remain forever obscure to you. So you're not always going to understand the impact that you do or don't make. But you may assume you are fulfilling your role if you apply yourself to converting your experiences to the highest advantage of others. In other words, use what you have to be a blessing to those around you. Now, it was the language that he used and the sort of belief system and the values really don't match entirely with mine. But this idea that you have been given and from that you give, that there is great nobility in using our gifts, talents, abilities, our minds, our time, our experiences to be a blessing to other people, to the advantage, to the blessing, the benefit of other people. And that's a really noble way. And so what this led him to do is to treat his life a bit like an experiment where he wanted to engage in a variety of activities and see how his efforts could contribute to the benefit of other people. And that's really what he describes as a key motive for his efforts. Now, what's interesting is when people start thinking about treasure hunting, the concept of a treasure hunt, whether it's literal or figurative, it often sounds very self-centered and selfish, that the whole goal is for me to get this treasure for me. And yet, that's really not the whole story. That the treasure hunt experience in literature and in real life, when people are seeking the treasure of a truth, they're trying to discover something they've yet to, or whatever, ultimately it ends up being an invitation to use what you've learned along the way and what you find at the end of the search. And the real quest is how to use that in a way that's noble and that's a blessing to other people. So let me go through the 5 quotes from him and see if there's something that we can glean from this. The first one is this: I love this, and as one who've done a lot of consulting over the years, helping organizations, companies, startups, and others prepare for uncertain futures. That's part of the work that I've done, doing futures and forecasting and trend analysis kind of work. I have used this quote in a variety of contexts, and it goes like this: "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And I believe there was another place where he wrote this idea that many people are so focused on many people are so focused on sort of legislating change in society, and his argument was that he felt as if the greatest changes happen in the patent office, not in Congress or those who are legislating. In the patent office, meaning those who are inventing and creating new things. And the point here is that oftentimes when we're trying to discover something, we use the tried and tested methods of the past, which can be very valuable. But sometimes we have to create new tools in order to discover new things. And this idea that he points out here is that sometimes we are just so focused and obsessed with like how something is broken that we just spend all our time trying to fix the broken thing rather than to create something that's not broken and better than the broken thing, even if it were fixed, if that makes sense. And that can have some real relevance in how we go about our problem solving and our truth seeking and our virtual and or our metaphorical and literal treasure hunting in our lives as well. So I offer that one for your consideration. Second one is this: we are called to be architects of the future, not its victims. So in the sort of philosophical realm and all, when people start talking about the future, some people call themselves kind of like technological determinists, where they believe that kind of technology is going to go its own way and we will succumb to its whims and we really don't have any big picture control over it. And Fuller worked operationally, functionally, from the assumption that we do have the ability to create things that result in better or worse outcomes in the future, that we can kind of design things. It's not just an inevitable piece. And sometimes in our work, in our life, even in our treasure hunting, we get caught into this place where we feel like we're just stuck and things are inevitable. And this quote is a really neat reminder that no, we have been gifted with the ability to create to create things that result in better outcomes. It may take time, it may take effort, it may involve multiple failures along the way, but it is something that can be done. And the next one is, I made 4,000 prototypes of a new type of housing before I finally got it right. In the Dymaxion project, he was reflecting on this. And that one, I think, is also a nice one. We've heard this with Thomas Edison and his attempts for creating what became the light bulb and the like as well. But this idea that the journey to success involves lots of attempts, lots of experiments, lots of failed attempts, but not just trying over and over and over again, but treating each attempt as an experiment. And the difference is you don't know the outcome of an experiment, but your goal is to learn something from each and every experiment. So the goal isn't even for the experiment to be successful or to fail, but it's for it to reveal something that you didn't know before. And that also can be really valuable when we're problem solving, when we're doing those literal and virtual treasure hunts. We're making attempts, but no attempt is just a wasted time. It's a lesson to be learned. Maybe you develop a new skill along the way with that attempt. Maybe you learn where something is not. Maybe you gain a new vocabulary, or you meet some new people who can be a helper along the way. There's not just thinking about it in this binary way, failed or succeeded, but what can I extract and learn from it, regardless of the attempt, if it was a failure or success. And then the fourth one is there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. And that one I also find really valuable as well, in that oftentimes in our lives, as we're trying to solve a problem or we're trying to discover a truth or a literal or figurative treasure, we may not have what is necessary to do it at the beginning. That you may actually grow into the person that's needed in order to solve the clue or find the treasure or discover the truth. That you are going to have to develop and build skills and insights and ways to look at things and teach yourself how to think more clearly. And in the process, along the journey, you're going to develop the strength for the next part of the journey. And that's why, even oftentimes, that's a very practical thing in our own life journey, that we look at the future and we're really intimidated by it because we can't imagine how we would be able to handle that possible future. But the reality is you would be a different person. You will be a different person in the future. You will develop new skills and abilities, and even when you face a trial, it begins the process of cultivating the skill and finding new people and resources and partners and allies and all of that stuff along the way. And that is part of the beauty of a treasure hunt, which is why I like using the metaphor of the treasure hunt and also being part of the actual literal treasure hunt community with some of the active treasure hunts going on today. And then the last one that I will share that I find really valuable from Buckminster Fuller is that he says in one place, in one of his lectures, I believe, I think I heard this one in one of his recorded lectures, was dare to be naive. So sometimes when people look at a person who is pursuing a solution to a really big, wicked problem, or they are trying to discover something where the chances are slim, that they can sometimes not be particularly encouraging of you in that endeavor, in that effort. And yet the invitation here is be naive enough to take the risk and to give it a try. You don't have to be so naive as to think that you have a 100% chance of success, but you're naive enough to think that you have a chance at being success with the right effort, the right timing, the right opportunity, the right colleagues and partners or allies, all of those kinds of things coming together. And you put these 5 quotes together and they cultivate a mindset, a disposition that lends itself well toward problem solving, truth seeking, and going after those treasures in life. Hope you find this useful. I look forward to your comments.